Live. Now let's check to see if it's actually live on our.
Hello. On our actual channels. Patrick, can
Yeah.
you check? Oh, it says live. Can we see anything? It says upcoming, Constantine. Oh, and
Guys
then
and
you click
run.
into it, and there we are.
What does it? Yeah, I don't see it on my channel yet. I see a live tab now, which I didn't have before. Let's see. Do I need to?
I'm so. He doesn't see it on yours, Constantine.
He doesn't.
No, he doesn't see it under the live tab for you.
Oh, now I see
Oh,
it
now he
on
sees
mine.
it. Now you are. Now he does.
Okay,
Is it
perfect.
on
So yeah,
Constantine, Pat? It's on
that's
there
what I
now.
see. Yeah. Okay, we're good. I think my Instagram should be live as well. And we'll check in a second.
He sees
But
it on
otherwise, we can
both
go.
now.
Okay. Can you have him check my Instagram, which is Unleash
Can you?
Thyself
Oh, he
today?
doesn't. He can't check it. He doesn't have Instagram.
He doesn't have Instagram. Okay.
Let's see if I can
It's
do
okay.
it.
We'll figure it. I mean,
I'll check it.
yeah, it
Just
looks
a
like
minute.
we're live. Oh
Yeah, we're
no, I have
live.
to. No, I have to go live on Insta. Okay, perfect. Okay, we're good. I'm live on Insta as well. I'm live on YouTube.
What, Patrick? There's no delay between either channel either. Yeah, it says you're live on Insta too.
Yeah. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put both of these on my screen because I know we may get comments and questions. So I want to make sure that we see them. Nope. Wrong one.
Definitely got some sun at the beach yesterday, according to
Did
this
you?
live screen. Like, you look so white, and I look like a freaking cherry tomato.
Well, that's okay. You are in Florida. I'm in Canada, right? So all I see outside is the snow. All I see outside is the snow. Anyway,
Ooh, snow.
Ashley, let's get talking. This is our first live stream, so welcome everyone. Whoever is watching this, if you're
Woo!
watching live, yes, if you're watching live or if you're watching the replay, welcome. We figured we'll do a quick introduction, how Ashley and I met, why we're even here, why you should listen. And yeah, that's pretty much it, right? So let's start with why they should listen, Ashley. Why should they listen to us talk?
Because we're hilarious and we go deep. No, I don't know. I mean, I think our conversations, I would like to be a fly on the wall with some of our conversations. And I think the topics we bring up just kind of sometimes give you this opportunity to be like, whoa, I never thought of that. And then also, like you and I have talked, Constantine, we're not 100% on the same wavelength. We have some differing ideas and opinions as to what spirituality looks like, what this illusion looks like, but we have the ability to have really great conversations that are respectful and just go deep. So I think people should watch to have that opportunity to just show up with what they have and not feel judged. I think today, between religion and spirituality and everything going on, it's so much I'm right, you're wrong, instead of, all right, let's hear what each other has to say and see what it sparks in one another. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
I love that, Ashley. And I'll add to that the idea that you and I have such different backgrounds as well, right? And everyone does. Everyone has their own stories, their own traumas, their own things that happen to them in life. And I come from a background where science was always and still is really big, right? And to bridge that gap from science to spirituality, it took me quite a bit of work. And again, it's still a work in progress. And realizing that science doesn't exist without spirituality, meaning that if we weren't in this illusion, we weren't in this place right now, if we didn't have spirituality, we wouldn't necessarily have science either. So seeing how we can bridge those two together and have conversations where we can bring psychology and we can bring math, we can bring any other science piece, right? Research papers, and then also look at what religion or spirituality or anything else is teaching us, and we see the blend, that's going to be amazing as well. Every time I get to do that for myself in conversations with you and others and with other guests on the show, I'm ecstatic because I'm like, wow, I'm learning so much. And you see that there's no gap really. Sure, science is still catching up. Science is still getting to a point where it still needs to prove certain things, but you can see now the blending, and you're like, well, if that's true, what else is true? And that's what gets me excited when you and I talk, because you get me to think outside the box. And that's what I believe most people listening to this can get out as well, is there are some things you agree with, there will be things you won't agree with, and there will be things that will leave you pondering and be like, maybe I should reflect on that. And I would say that's, from my point of view, combined with what you said, that's what I would want people to take out. Just perhaps a different perspective, perhaps some seeds, perhaps something that would allow them to do what? To grow as people, right? To grow as souls in this illusion, and to achieve more in life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just another disclaimer, we're probably going to say things that prickle you. And I always say, when you get that prickle inside, meaning that irritation, that anger, that want to get defensive, it's an opportunity to see what that reflection is, to go even deeper, to get curious. And yeah, that's what we're here to just walk together and provide.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, Ashley. Okay, so let's dive right in. The way you and I met, and this was a year ago now, through the podcast I started, right? Unleash Thyself, and I believe you reached out to me at one point using one of the apps, and then we connected and we had a beautiful conversation on the subconscious mind to some degree, but also it was, if I remember correctly, it was a lot of the inner child conversation and healing the inner child, which is something you're so familiar with.
Yeah, it was. And it was one of those apps that you're a part of when you started your podcast, and you got like hundreds of applicants, right?
Exactly.
And
Well,
some
yeah.
and
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and somehow we connected, like, out of all the midst of all of them. And I think we immediately just had this connection, and ever since, we've met like once a month at least, and just talked deeper about this stuff that we're going to talk about on here, as well as business and just impact and really life.
Yeah. And I like what you mentioned there, and I would like to, from my point of view, share something with the audience that they sometimes hear me say, is this idea, the power of connections, but not just in-person connections, because we yet haven't met in person yet, right? But we have this connection that we were able to form virtually, have multiple conversations, and the time will come soon enough when we get to meet in person. But if you're someone in the audience listening and you don't have those deep connections yet with people in your life, like for example, where I live right now, I've been here for 6 years. I have some of these deep connections, but not many. But being able to connect with people like yourself, Ashley, and a few others virtually pretty much extended my reach and my ability to connect with people immensely. So don't overlook the possibility of maybe you join as a guest on a podcast like Ashley did, and as I'm doing right now, or maybe you look to start your own show just to connect with people, or just join a live stream and start interacting with people. That's really powerful. Because had I not met you, Ashley, had I not gone out of my way to start to have conversations with people that have different opinions than mine, I wouldn't be what I am today. I wouldn't have a better understanding of what's happening in the world and what's happening around me, and I wouldn't be able to grow as fast as I have.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like you said, the power of connection. And it, the interesting piece is, I saw a study the other day, which kind of scares me. It says we are the most connected we have ever been, and the loneliest we have ever been. And I was like, what? Like, we have the most ability to connect constantly, but in turn, it's like this false sense of connection. It's this superficial, like today here in the US is the Super Bowl, and everybody's eyes are going to be on, does Taylor Swift make it to the Super Bowl for her boyfriend Travis? And, it's this very superficial connection instead of these deeper connections. And I think you and I took something that could have been a superficial connection and brought it to an even deeper level connection. And I think your podcast just does that beautifully.
Thank you.
But it's like this facade. I always talk about the smoke and mirrors. Before we got on here, you were like, well, let's talk about the ego. And I was like, okay, well, this takes us right there. Like, the smoke and mirrors, anytime we are seeking something that is actually our innate state of unconditional love, our oneness. I mean, that is something we agree upon, is the oneness and the connection of us all. The ego, which is that of fear, which is that of separation and sacrifice, immediately is like, oh, they want this, I'm going to create my own version of it. So what I see happen is we were seeking the connection, seeking the remembrance of us not even needing connection because we're not separate. But on the ego's terms, it was like, all right, here's a crap ton of connection that is superficial, but it's going to make you feel like it's your fault that you're not feeling the connection, because it's connection, right? It's like, oh, you can, Zoom with someone across the world. I mean, you're in Canada, I'm in Florida, and right now we're having a live conversation on YouTube, maybe in someone's house in, Australia or Asia or wherever it may be. But consciously, it makes us believe that we have all this connection, but we're not feeling the wholeness that we were seeking, because that's not really where it can be found. It can't be found externally. It's in this internal place. So, I mean, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, Constantine. I know I went down a rabbit hole, but when I saw that research, makes sense, but it's so sad.
It does, and I couldn't agree more, Ashley. And it's very true because of these beautiful devices that we have that connect us to everything. At the same time, like you said, it disconnects us because we end up scrolling, and I catch myself at times doing that, right? We end up consuming content, and that may send us down a negativity path, and we don't necessarily connect with people through the positivity. We connect through the negativity. We may leave a mean comment. We may leave we just in our minds, we may go on and on about it. And with the research you mentioned, what I've also seen is that, and this goes back to, I think, the 30s or the 40s, they did the research, and this is a terrible way they've conducted this, but they've proven something that I think a lot of us kind of know, but don't know enough. So what they've done is they took essentially orphaned children, like newborns, and they put them in a box, and they gave them food, they gave them everything they wanted, but what they kept away from was human interaction. So this is cruel, right? This is probably one of the worst studies they've ever done. But what they found out at the end is that every single child died within weeks because the human interaction element was missing. They had everything else, yet the human interaction was missing. And you sometimes see this with older people that don't have family around, and they start going crazy and they start pretty much passing away, right? And I think we take it for granted how much we need and crave human connection. And I believe that the internet is allowing us, like you said earlier as well, to find meaningful connections wherein our personal life might be hard, might be difficult, because you may be someone that challenges the status quo, and then you cannot find people in your life that you can connect with because you would be looked down upon or made to look stupid or whatever the case might be. And the internet allows you to find those communities. Now, this can be taken to the extreme, and we've seen how that plays out, right? And that's, of course, a big challenge that we have to talk about or we have to be aware of. But like you said, finding connections with people that not only agree with you every single time, but also help you grow by challenging you, by challenging some of your thoughts, some of your beliefs. I feel that's kind of the sweet spot, at least for me. And that's what I've gotten the most out of this podcast, which, funny enough, I never expected. I didn't start the podcast to be like, oh, I'm going to talk to Ashley, and as a result of talking to Ashley, I'm going to become friends with her, and then I'm going to allow my mind to grow and everything else, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it never crossed my mind. Exactly. It was just about sharing to other people. And that was something that I never considered. And yet here we are, we're doing that. And it's magical. That's probably been my favorite part of doing a show like this, is the connection I have with people, with yourself, Ashley, with a few other people. And that's it. And it's amazing to see, to be honest.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love all that. And yes, I'm very familiar with that study. I worked in child protection, and we actually would kind of reference that study at times about if a child really acted like an animal or like had diagnosis with autism, we'd often find out it was environmental factors that actually caused that. But I want to take this to an even deeper level and maybe blow some
Sure.
people's minds, but also bring the reality forward. So I'm a firm believer, anything that we are not willing to face within, we project out. So we seek it externally. Happiness, connection. So when we think of the kids in the box, we know when we come here, the purpose is to separate us. I mean, we literally are in separate bodies. So it's to make us believe that we are separate and to make us believe that we are meant to suffer and sacrifice. So the child in the box was brought here for the purpose of belief. It's separate. And because it has not been able to forgive the things that's holding it back from knowing its true oneness, it doesn't have the ability to project out. It doesn't have the ability to make that external connection. Therefore, it no longer exists. So when people get older and they begin to deteriorate, these are not scientifically proven. This is just Ashley's like rabbit hole where my brain goes, or my mind, is that for all of their life, they were seeking something outside of themselves that was always within themselves. And I'm not dismissing external connections. They're beautiful. But I think the ability to take an external connection to a deeper level is only possible when you first have cultivated that internal connection with yourself. So if these people become old and they haven't cultivated that internal connection and understanding of oneness and true connection with self, the big ass, or everything, then they don't have the opportunity outside of them. They don't have the opportunity to project. So then it's just like this constant back and forth attack, and then it's like, what's the point? What's the purpose?
Yeah, that's a beautiful take. And it reminds me of that mirroring concept, right? Because you mirror what shows up in your life is what you have on the inside. So if you don't have a connection with self, if you're lonely on the inside, then that's what's going to be projected on the outside. And I can see this both from the spirituality side of things, but also from psychology, because if you think about how our brains work at the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, what I've learned is that obviously you take in all the information around you. There has to be a filter, and that filter is your focus. So if your focus is on how lonely you are, as an example, right, and how you cannot find people to connect with on a deeper level, I mean, why would anything other than that show up in your life? Because your focus is on that. And to me, it makes so much sense when you look at it from all angles. It doesn't matter if it's psychology, science, or spirituality. They're explained differently, but it's pretty much the same concept.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, like, I believe the purpose here is to forgive and peel back the onion layers to remember truth, which that is, you are fully unconditional love and are one with everything. But yeah, when we're seeking outside of us, it's a lack of within. And I know I attempted suicide when I was 17 and was almost successful, which, is a controversial statement, but I was so lonely. I felt like, what's the purpose? I had moved out of my parents' house. My father was significantly mentally ill, and I was living with my best friend and her family. Her family, cared about me to the extent of just another child living in the house. And then my best friend, who was all I thought I had, I upset her that night, and I was like, what's the purpose? But really, it was the relationship within myself. I didn't have that connection, and all the connections I sought outside of myself were gone. And the same happened with my divorce. My happiness was all outside of myself, and when it was gone, it was like, crap, where to go? And that's when I went down really dark hallways, seeking to find that happiness, when it was always about the forgiveness at the level of the mind, and just really understanding at the deepest level what truth is. But that was like a whole journey, right? We talked in my first podcast with you, it was a lot of discussion around the inner child and reparenting the inner child. And now I know that I am the child. We all are the child. We are that defenseless, curious being of unconditional love. That is our our true essence. So the whole time that I was doing this work with my inner child I was really finding my way back to truth. But
Right.
I was telling someone the other day, it's like the middle of the onion, that like oval piece in the middle of an onion, you peel back all of the layers and there it is, still perfectly like smooth and like oval shaped. We so often are like, oh, my inner child is damaged. And for a long time I thought that, and a long time I went on that adventure. But the problem is, if you say that, then it's true. You're constantly chasing these fires of this damaged inner child instead of realizing your inner child isn't damaged. There's just a bunch of layers in the way of your truth. Like, you are not damaged. You cannot be damaged. You cannot be broken. And, I think that's in the healing community, in the spiritual community, we instead glorify being broken. But I don't think we understand how impactful that is to the subconscious. And I would love to hear, Constantin, your side take, because when we say words like, I am broken, but now I have gold inlay from Japan, so I'm even more beautiful, you still have just told your subconscious you're broken, right? I don't care if you threw gold in there. You still have reiterated you're broken, so you're constantly going to be broken.
It's very interesting. Thank you. You have that. I mean, I agree with it 100%. And I was actually working with a client last night. We had a beautiful session. And one thing that came up a lot was us taking a look at how things are either happening to you or for you. Mm-hmm. And most people, including myself in the past, would look at things happening to you. And what does that mean? If something happens to me, that means that I have been victimized. Something went wrong. So then the focus is usually on the negative. Mm-hmm. If something happens for you, it's not that you necessarily ignore the negative, but your focus is no longer on the negative. Yes, these bad things happened. My focus is on the positives. What have I learned out of it? What have I gotten out of it? And it's beautiful to see when you have a deep conversation with someone around that, which kind of ties in with the inner child, right? Because a lot of those conversations that we have with ourselves come from wounded places in our childhood. At least that's what I found in my personal experience. Once you get to open the possibility that, hey, wait a second, these things didn't just happen to you, they also happened for you, or just for you, depending on how the person sees it, then all of a sudden, the light bulbs go off, and it's like, oh yeah, I can look at the positives. And now you can reframe and you can put your focus on the positives while maintaining the fact that, yes, negative things happen, but you don't have to focus on them, because we talked about this earlier. Science has shown us, you think about the red car, you're going to see red cars on the street a lot more than you're going to see anything else. Because again, the power of your focus, you can only focus on so much. So if you focus on the negativity, that's what you're going to get. If you focus on the positivity, that's what you get. So in the example you gave, you started with the negativity, let's say, right? I am ugly, whatever, and then I put gold on. The positive stuff on top doesn't even matter, because your focus is still first on the negative side. So that's how I see it play out, and it's a beautiful example. And now for me, the inner child, here's a funny story for you, Ashley. When you and I had our conversation, I hadn't yet truly began to heal aspects of my inner child and understand what went on and be able to heal parts of it. I had one encounter with my inner child when I was in Ecuador doing plant medicine. And it took a while to get there, but I had an encounter, and it was a beautiful encounter. And then from then on, I wasn't necessarily sure how to do it. It wasn't until last summer, actually, when I connected to another one of my guests who was a hypnotherapist, or is a hypnotherapist. And that's how I used that tool to go down the path of my subconscious mind to find those places where things happen to me, and then reframe them to they happen for me, heal that part of me, and move on, essentially. Not always play the same story on repeat, which is the negativity aspect you mentioned as well. So that's what I have found. And I've done probably 6 sessions with her over the last 7-8 months. Every single one amazingly powerful, because it allowed me to find those parts of me that perhaps were wounded and misunderstood, and bring them to the light and understand them. And that to me was so powerful. Now, again, hypnotherapy is just one way, right? I mentioned plant medicine, there's meditation, mindfulness, the methods you use. There's so many ways in which you can achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think again, like that child within is not wounded. The child within is like the defenseless. It's your highest self. I mean, it is your guiding light, the one that is filled with curiosity and wonder and complete, like I keep saying, complete defenselessness.
Okay.
So, like with you, I would correlate that to almost like, it'd be like who Luna is talking about when Luna is coming to you and like giving you guidance, right? It's your truth, your truth. Like I'm trying to explain, but it's literally like
Yeah.
the truth of everything about you. It's your connection. It's like here's your inner child, and then the voice that you receive from the Holy Spirit or your highest self or your angels or whatever it may be that connects you to this other place. So it's like you are all one, but then you put all these layers of crap on top. So then we need like this conversation to occur in order to remind us, right? Like I even have to catch myself because sometimes I say learn or even heal, which I think is just understandable, but it's literally all remembering. Like there's nothing to heal, there's nothing to learn. It's all about remembering the truth of everything. And that goes through an untying process of untying from the ego, which is untying from fear, which is untying from attack. And that gets you back to the defenseless child that you are, the defenseless child that is like constantly begging for your attention. Well, not begging, it won't ever beg, but constantly just like reminding you, saying those little remembrances, but it's up to you to listen. And we can't listen if you have like 15 pairs of earmuffs on, right? You can't hear it.
I love that. And funny enough, when you started going on this path, I was like, I'm not sure if I agree with you. But then as you got to the analogy and to the example, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. So like I one thing that came up for me, I took this pen up, right? So let's say, this is a gold pen for those that can't see it, beautiful pen. So if I understand correctly what you said is, let's imagine this is our soul, this is our defenseless child, right? Like that's what we are in this life. And then as we go through life, layers and layers get put upon this, right? So I can wrap this in a napkin, right? And I can see less and less of it. I can put layers and layers. So what, if I'm understanding correctly, actually, I'm curious to see your take. Essentially, we have so many layers on top, so many veils, so many earmuffs, like in your example, that you don't actually know what's underneath anymore. And by taking those layers, you can reveal more and more pieces of your true self. And it's not to say that you're, perhaps some we can call it healing, but it's like essentially what you're doing is you're remembering, right? Because by removing the layers, you're revealing parts of yourself that always existed, but you forgot. Am I understanding that correctly in terms of how you
Yeah, pretty
position
much.
that?
And I would call it spirit because there is only one here. So it's like it's one. I believe there's one projected into many, instead of where some believe there's many connected as one. So yeah, it would
Yes.
be the one in all these multiple layers of division and separation, and then on top of that, all these layers on top of each division and separation, and we just continue to divide and divide and divide, and we continue to put layers and layers and layers and layers on. But that's the coolest part. It's like I say, if I come to you and I'm like, Constantin, you have to go find the Mr. Beard's treasure or whatever his name, Blackbeard's treasure, because that's going to be on Outer Banks, and I love that show. You have to go find Blackbeard's treasure. Versus, I mean, how you're like, okay, there's a lot of steps to take. First, like, even who is Mr. Blackbeard? Like, where was he at? All these things. Versus me saying, you have to remember where Mr. Blackbeard's trailer is. Like, which sounds a lot easier to do? Find or remember?
Probably remember, I would imagine.
Right, because remember means you already contain it. So there's not all this there's not all this research and stuff that needs to be done. You already have all the answers. You just have to remember it. And I think that's where we get so caught up in this hamster wheel, this new hamster wheel we've created of personal development and spirituality. We think we constantly need to be learning all these new things when it's really about remembering. So
Yeah.
when I see, personal development or spirituality or even our conversation, we're not here to teach you anything that you don't already know. We're here to spark remembrance in you. And I think you have a beautiful story, if you're open to sharing that, Constantine, of how we can say something and someone hear something completely different, because it's never about teaching anyone anything. It's
Yeah.
all about, it could be your tonality, it could be the word, it could be whatever it is. You're sparking remembrance in them.
Yes, and that's actually so powerful, actually, because it wasn't long ago that I was of the opinion that you're teaching people, you're essentially showing new things and sparking their thoughts. And even now I catch myself, even the way I introduced the why at the beginning of this conversation, and the way you put it now is so beautiful, because all we're doing really is helping them remember something that they knew, like those layers, so you can see more parts of this beautiful pen or soul that you are, and then get deeper. And I believe the story you're referencing to is something that took me a while to wrap my head around, but something that happened only a few weeks ago. But still, when I say it took a while, it took a couple of weeks for me to put the dots together. But I went through a beautiful experience through a breathwork ceremony of sorts, which lasted about an hour and a half. And then I shared that with you and a few other people. And I believe that's the story you're mentioning, right?
Yep.
The one with my friend, yeah. So one of the friends that I ended up sharing the story with, which wasn't necessarily the top of my list initially to share with, because we didn't necessarily have a deep connection at the time, I felt inclined to share the story with her through essentially a WhatsApp message. I recorded the message and I left it for her. It was like 12 minutes to explain what happened. And by me sharing the story, it literally triggered remembers in her subconscious mind and conscious mind to events that happened 3-4 years ago and then farther back. And literally the day after, she got these big revelations. She remembers so much that she reached out to me and said, wow, by you sharing the story, it allowed me to heal so many parts of me that I didn't know I could. So in other words, and I my ego was like, oh, that's cool, that's powerful. I share something, I did something good. But it wasn't until later that I realized that all of us have that power, right? By you sharing your story and what you go through, you don't know the beautiful impact it can have on someone. Because the way I see it, you either plant seeds that can help remembers down the line, or you can help them, or you can spark something in them right in that moment that will trigger perhaps a layer to get removed, and now they remember the piece. And healing is remembering, if I understand the way you put it nicely, Ashley, and I believe that's pretty much how it is, right? Because as you remove a layer, you could say you healed that part of yourself, but you also remembered in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but I still believe there is no healing. Like that's just like a word we made up, because we're not a body. I mean, you and I can agree with that. And I think that's a thing that sometimes confuses me with the spiritual world or even religion. I mean, anything that, has to do with um belief that there's something more, right? Belief
Mhm.
than just the non-dualistic nature that some people think, well, like, we're just here and you're just here and then it's done, nothing. um is that we all believe that we have a soul or a spirit or something greater. That's why our body dies and it leaves. Then why are we so identified with the body? Like, we all know, like, we can literally have a conversation no matter what religion or whatever. If you believe there's something greater out there, you do not believe you are your body when we have that conversation. But when we have a conversation about anything else, you are fully your body. Because if you look at any decision you make, you only make it because of the belief that you are a body. Any decision.
Yes.
And that you are separate and it's for gain or sacrifice or whatever. But if instead we really all realized that we're not this body, like, it would just be I mean, I don't think this place would exist anymore, but that's a conversation for another day. But essentially, I did a video the other day where I'm like, yes, the body does keep the score. And I shared this with you, Constantine, and you were kind of like, whoa,
Yes.
yeah, you're right. And the reason why I say yes, it does is because you can only experience trauma if you are a body, if you believe you are a body. So when we are doing all these healing modalities and really focus that the body is keeping the score, we're missing the entire point. Like, as long as there is a game and a scorecard, it will continue. So you can put out fires and do, healing at the level of the body, which I mean, I've done breath work, which is beautiful and it releases so much energy. You have done Constantine as well. I've done
Yep.
Reiki. I've done different types of healing. And I'm not saying that they aren't beneficial. But so often do we rely on them, that our body is the one healing us at the level of the mind, when you're not even a freaking body. So how can that be the case? And the one way to never experience trauma again is to fully remember that you are not a body. You will never experience trauma again because you know you're not the body. You will not store it. But as long as you focus on you being a body and in fully believing you're a body and making decisions as if you're a body and attempting to only heal yourself at the level of the body, let me tell you what, more and more will keep coming, because that's what the body's for. Is a trauma. It wants trauma. It's a trauma creator. So you put out this fire and you got a new fire starting over here. You put out this fire, you got a new fire starting out over here. That is why essentially coaching industries, therapy, the doctor, when you sorry, I'm drawing a blank here, but when you compare the coaching industry and say therapists versus the medical industry in big pharma, and who's making more money, it's the medical industry and big pharma, because everybody believes that is their body that's going to heal them. It is their body that's autonomously doing everything on its own, when first of all, you're not a body. So whatever you believe you are is actually the one causing your body to do all this shit. Your body doesn't do anything on its own. You're not
Yes.
a body. It's like you put on your space suit to go on Mars, and all of a sudden you run out of air because you didn't put the air in there, but you blame the suit because the suit didn't do it. Like, what?
Now this is very deep, actually. I'll be honest with you. Even for me, it's like I'm getting to understand it more and more. But the question that comes up for me is, okay, so let's say you understand you're not a body, because of course that's what most people that are connected spiritually through a religion or otherwise, doesn't matter. That's pretty much, you believe, you're not a body. But how do you go from knowing it to actually embodying that? That's the word that came up. It's probably not the right word, but meaning, like you said, trauma cannot. How do you get to that stage? It's like just thinking, oh yeah, that's true, doesn't really get you to the stage.
Oh, right, 100%. And I think at the beginning, you talked about a lot of people who are spiritual know that we're not a body. I would say maybe there's a few percent in the world that have actually made it to the place of full embodiment, because that is enlightenment. And today there's a lot of, false idols, people stating they're at enlightenment, when they're still making decisions as if they're a body. They're still making decisions for themselves. I mean, there's tons of coaches out there that are, claim to be enlightened and come be enlightened with them, which if we looked at how they ran their business, how they did anything, you would 100% say that, no, that's not the case. Think Buddha, think Jesus, think Mother Teresa. That's who we're thinking when we know someone has fully realized that they are not their body. They're just like pure bliss. Like nothing bothers them. So to answer your question, essentially, that is like the practice of untying from the ego, because the ego's domain is the body. It's the vessel that the ego uses to constantly remind you of separation and sacrifice, or constantly make you believe that you are separated and that you must sacrifice and suffer. Because we know when you're on that belief, you're on this constant duality roller coaster. You know, we even have statements, at least in the US, where it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. When something is really great, we wait for the other shoe to drop, because that's the reality of it. So, because that's living in the ego, because the ego is not truth. Truth cannot be changed, and that's unconditional love. You are one. There can't be judgment, because you're not separate, right? You and I've talked about this before too, is like, when we say we are one and you find your way back to that place of true oneness, judgment cannot exist, because in order to judge, you must have something outside of yourself. And if we're truly one, there's nothing outside of you. And I think that's another place we get caught up in, is that when you are a body and you fully believe you are seeing and experiencing from a body, you are constantly judging. Because in order for me to know that Constantine's hair is brown, in my mind, I had to judge it against blonde or other colors. So it's like this constant judgment when you are in that place. So again, to get to that full place is really constantly untying yourself from the ego, which is when the thoughts come up that you are a body, or that you can be hurt, or that you can, experience separation and sacrifice, is not shaming it, not pushing it down, those thoughts, but letting them bubble to the surface, seeing them, acknowledge, yeah, that was my thought, because I'm part ego right now, and forgiving it, realizing it's like never actually happened. This is part of the dream. Right? If you did something awful in your dream last night, you might be startled today, but you're not going to hold it. You're not going to hold it like a freaking, the cross you bear, which many people talk about as well. You're going to release it because it was a dream. Who cares?
Yes.
Sorry, I went on a rampage, Constantin.
No. It's like, our journeys have so many similarities, yet, of course, the stage we're on in our journeys is very, very different, right? So it's beautiful for me to just listen to what you're saying, because it opens up my mind and my heart to new perspectives. And that's the beauty of this type of conversations and podcasts, and you connecting to people at that level, is because you get to experience different perspectives. And again, you don't have to agree with them, because there are some things you said that at first I was like, nah, I don't agree with it. The more you explained it and the more I sat with it, I'm like, okay. And sometimes you and I had a conversation, months ago, let's say, and then it took me weeks or months to even come around to be like, maybe that's how it is, and maybe not, right? And that's fine. Mm-hmm. But what you just say here is beautiful. It's like just starting with the realization that you are not your body, right? The ego has a role to play. And I was talking to a mentor of mine yesterday, and the ego has its place here, right? It has a play, like it's keeping you alive. It's doing a lot of things technically in this world, right? And it has a role to play, but it doesn't mean that it has to rule your life. By you getting to the core of who you are, then you can start relying on it less and less, right? If I were to translate it in my own words.
Yeah, and that's where I think we kind of still differ. And I think the ego, our words might look the same. And that's the thing too, is like when we have these conversations, when it's about spirituality, it's about the content, it's not about the form. So sometimes words get in our way, because first of all, words weren't created to explain these things, because they're outside of the illusion. Words were created to describe the illusion. Words are twice removed from truth. So that like aha moments, those knowingness within, is like a deeper level of understanding. Words, again, cannot fully describe this, but it's that remembrance. They can spark remembrance within. That's what we're doing. But I believe that the ego has no place in your truth, in who you truly are. But what I agree with what you're saying, Constantine, is the ego is this place. The ego created this place to keep us, to help us hide our shame and guilt. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day as well. Yes. So because I used to believe that, oh, the ego keeps you alive. You need the ego. And the ego wants you to believe that. The ego wants you to believe that you need the ego, at least to some aspect, because then you'll never actually become enlightened and leave. The ego needs you in order to survive, right? The ego needs you to believe in it. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. The ego only exists because of your belief in it, our belief in it. So that's my thought there, that the ego, like my goal is like to remember that the ego really doesn't exist. It just exists because of my belief in it. And then I will no longer see it. But the cool thing is, there's thousands of ways to get to enlightenment. Like some people may find it through the church. Some people may find it, through watching cartoons. I don't know. But like there is no way that is one size fits all, because it can't, because we live in the world of duality. So if it was one size fits all, then that would fall into oneness, and oneness is not what this illusion is about. So that's the cool thing of like these conversations, because I think today, more than ever, we're really like an us and them when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to us on our ladders home. I know I've seen a lot of very famous people, famous in the aspect of in the New Age community, leaving the New Age community and going back to the church and talking like major trash on the New Age community. And yes, I compare my thought system to the New Age a lot. But I'm not talking trash. I'm trying to show how I've transitioned from that thought system to the thought system I am in now, because I very much have lived there. But a lot of these videos I've seen of people who've made their way back to the church are very angry. Like the New Age movement like tricked them and was dark and awful and was the devil. And what I think really has happened is the truth is somewhere in the middle. But of course, when you're in the ego on the duality roller coaster, you're just riding that pendulum back and forth from one side to the other. And the reason I know that is because usually when you're on the pendulum, you get significant anger towards the other side of the pendulum. Right? Instead of when you're in the middle, yes, you can point out the differences between you and say New Age, you and say religion. But there's no anger, because you also know that people in the New Age or people in religion can find their way home that way too. Yeah. And it's not up to you to judge them. It's up to you to share your experience and how you've navigated your way where you are, because there might be people out there that it sparks remembrance.
Yeah, and I love what you touched on a few really critical things there, and the division that we see in the world. And that's pretty much what we're talking about, because so many of us have been shifted to one side of the pendulum. So then everything that's on the other side now becomes the enemy. And we create this negativity, right? Like we see it through politics, we see it through genders, we see it through religion, we see it through everything. And it's realizing that you mentioned something else, the universal laws in this universe, duality being one of them. But there's also a law of balance, right? Which is the pendulum we're talking about. So like if we find balance, that's really the sweet spot. And it's not easy to do. And it's pretty much for every aspect of your life, the way I see it. And in the areas of my life where I found balance, at least in a short amount of time, in a short term, I mean, those are usually the most calm areas of my life. And then the ones where you still deviate from left to right or right to left, that's when you can see this division, and you can see judgment come in a lot more, right? Because you and I talked about judgment, and that's probably a topic for another time. But it's not that you want to get to a point of no judgment, because that's impossible. And you made me open my eyes to that. But more, it's like you want to reduce it. And by being more in balance, judgment becomes less of an issue, which causes, in my opinion, a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the world.
Well, I think too, Constantin, while we're still here appearing as bodies, judgment I now see as a flashlight, because when you judge, you have first judged yourself. So when you judge someone else, you have first judged yourself. So now we can use that as a flashlight, and it's about not placing weight, but getting curious and bringing awareness to what this judgment is. Because if, like, let's say I'm irritated because you're running late. I think that's a lot of people have that. Like either they are the one that runs late, or they get irritated because other people run late, or both. So really, that's an opportunity when you have that frustration of someone else running late to go within, like, what is this that it's reflecting? What have I still not have forgiven that this is actually being a mirror of? Because any time you feel any sort of extreme emotion due to someone else's actions, it has nothing to do with them. And it has everything to do with your own internal dialogue. So if you really want to go on this journey of untying from the ego and understanding, literally get curious about everything. Literally get curious.
And I love you said that, because it kind of ties it back to where we started discussing things happening for you or to you. And if you come, pretty much what you're talking about, if I'm understanding correctly, is if you come from a place of curiosity, then you're like, okay, so how is this happening for me? Because as soon as you say it's happening to me, it's no longer a place of curiosity. It's a fact, right? It's happening to me. Now I can, do whatever I want with it. We usually play the victim, right? I can't believe you made me late, right? You're not expecting my time, you're not expecting me, whatever. Versus, okay, how is this happening for me? What's, like you said, what is it mirroring within me that I probably should take a look at if it bothers me to that point? And that's such a beautiful example, for sure. Now, I know as we're coming up on the hour, Ashley, let's see if we can wrap this up. I know it's our first live stream, so thank you for those watching either live or in person, or not in person, but rather later, right? Like watching this at another point in time. Thank you so much for being with us. Ashley Abramson from Big Miracle Energy, and then Constantin Morun from Unleash Thyself here. We have YouTube channels. I have a podcast. Ashley's on the podcast as well. Go check them out. Lots of content. If you like what we talked about, you'll see more and more of this. And remember, the reason we're here is for our own growth and to also help others remember and grow as well. Grow through remembering, I guess. That's what I would want to say.
Yeah. And giving is receiving. So, us sharing our conversations. I mean, I think that's, as we wrap it up, just how it really sparked is you and I have deep conversations, like we said, back to the beginning. And we're like, hey, some people might want to hear this. Let's throw it out there. So we really don't have any expectations other than you and I love to chat. And now we get to chat weekly. And whoever wants can join our discussion.
Exactly. And join us in the comments, send us messages. You can join us on a live stream at some point in time too. We're going to have guests on other people. So yeah, let's interact. We talked about power of community at the beginning. Let's build those communities we wish we had.
Yes.
Beautiful. Awesome, Ashley. Well, I want to wish you and everyone else a happy Sunday and a beautiful day and a beautiful start to your week.
Yeah. And thank you so much for tuning in to our first live stream. And we'll have more details to come of what it continues to look like. And we are so grateful for you. And how I end everything is just remember you're worth it.
100%. 100%. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, everyone.